What's going on, YouTube Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to do with you guys. This is actually one that I've done multiple times on this channel, either in the form of a review or just an overview because of sprints and variants and blah blah blah. This is the Spyderco Para 3, and this particular Para 3 is in Maxamet steel. Maxamet is a very interesting steel. It's a fairly new steel. I believe the first time it showed its face was 2014. I have a lot to talk about with this knife, and we'll jump right into it. If you are new to my channel, if you have never watched my channel or watched any of my videos, I like to upload daily. So if you like knife stuff, you like knife reviews, knife overviews, you like discussion things, you like unboxings, this might be the channel for you. So go ahead and subscribe and make sure your notifications are set to all. My wife actually bought me this knife. You guys may have seen the unboxing video. My wife every year buys me a pocket knife. The deal is that she's only allowed to use the information that she's got from me and my incessant knife rambling, and nothing else. I can't hint at things. I can't, like, tell her, I really want this. Can you buy this specifically? And she ended up getting me this. This year I was not aware that there was a G10 and Maxamet knife available other than the PM2, which always seemed to be out of stock. For whatever reason, I thought all of Spyderco's other Maxamet offerings, and Spyderco, by the way, seems to be the only company that's working with Maxamet as of right now, 2019. I assumed that all of their in-stock offerings were in FRN, and I did not want FRN, and my wife found this pretty quick. So I was pretty excited about that because I had been looking for the perfect Para 3 to add to my rotation. I fell in love with the Para 3 after I realized that I could get my entire hand around the handle in a very comfortable way and get that feeling of control that I seek in a lightweight and compact package. So I was really happy with that. Let's go ahead and get some measurements here real quick. And like I said, I realize I have reviewed this knife already, but none of my other reviews and overviews have been quite in the same style as I do now. I was kind of finding my comfortability with the channel and finding my style. And now that I've found it, I'd like to give this knife a proper review. So overall length of the Para 3 coming in at about 7¼ inches. Blade length from tip to scale is exactly 3 inches. And the actual cutting edge is about 2 1/8. Not a lot of cutting edge on this knife. It's because of the choil. We'll be talking about that here. Let me give you guys, actually, you know what? Of course, I tried to jump ahead. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons here. Up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 is coming in at 8.6 inches overall. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. You can see here this is an important size comparison because the Para 3 is essentially a smaller PM2. Now, there are differences, and the Para 3 is meant to be its own thing, which is why it's not called the Paramilitary 3. It actually is called the Para 3. It's also not called the PM3. They were very specific that the Para 3 was its own thing, despite being basically an evolved and smaller and more compact version of the Paramilitary 2. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, because the Para 3, normally is the third knife in the size comparison lineup, we'll actually use the old one up against the Spyderco Delica. Spyderco Delica coming in at 7 inches. It's just a little tiny bit shorter. Now that there is a lightweight Para 3, which is not something I'm interested in for myself, you guys may see it reviewed on the channel in the near future, but I just don't like FRN. Now that the Para 3 lightweight exists, it, in my opinion, is just kind of all the way around. It's just a better Delica. The Delica is a great knife, and people who still prefer the lockback or just the overall profile of the Delica might still go for it, but it's the reason that I'm kind of moving away from it in terms of a size comparison, because it's just not something that, a lot of people have. It's not nearly as common a knife as far as the parts of the knife community that are watching. I'm not saying that nobody has one. I'm saying people are kind of evolving away from it. I'm sure that's going to stir some people up. Let me give you guys an example of the action here. This is still breaking in, and honestly I think mine's just a little bit tight. I actually don't mind that though. I don't need my knives to drop shut perfectly. It does kind of, just with a little bit of encouragement, it will actually drop a little bit. But I'm getting used to this one, whipping it in and clicking it back out. It is very smooth. These operate on it's like it's a bushing setup, or is it like a pseudo bushing setup, something like that. So you can crank it down all the way and it's always going to be roughly the same. Mine might just be a hair tight, but it's all right. It's easy for me to manipulate. The blade did come perfectly centered. And so this is one of those situations where I'm just going to leave it alone. I've had better experiences leaving things alone than messing with them. And the action is to my liking. It's not absolutely perfect. You know, like my PM2, for example, drops. And my Shaman, which is right here, also drops. The Shaman is centered, but the PM2 isn't. And it's just kind of like, well, whatever. So I'm okay with that. Moving on here, let's talk about... Oh, no, we got to weigh it. I'm off today, guys. Overall weight on the Para 3 in G10 coming in at 3.53 ounces. Let's go ahead and weigh it again. 3.53 ounces. So this is plenty lightweight for me. It's one of those things where, you know, they have the Para 3 lightweight, but I don't emphasize carry weight so much that I need to shave off additional ounces past the 3.53 ounce mark that this is at. I am perfectly happy with that weight. This is the perfect, you know, small carry EDC. This is the smallest knife that I've been able to carry that gives me that same feeling of maximum preparedness that I need, or that I always ask from my everyday carry knife. Traditionally, I carry larger knives because I can get my whole hand around them, and because they give me more of a feeling of security in the sense that, you know, I am more capable with a larger knife. Now, obviously that is not 100% the case. It's just what I have found in terms of my own individual needs. The special thing about the Para 3 is that it gives me that feeling. And I found out that to me, it's not about the blade. It's about how it feels in my hand. You know, it's about the ergonomics. Now I have a bias for forward choils. You can see like 4 of my 6 EDC knives are Spyderco knives, and they all have forward choils. Let me move that out of the way and get the Shaman in there. It's going to be a tight fit here, but we'll get them all in there. These guys all have forward choils. I like that. I like being able to choke up on that. It makes me feel like my hand isn't forced into one position. So knives like the Shaman, the Para 3, actually specifically the Shaman and Para 3 have room for multiple hand positions, and you're not being forced specifically into certain positions. With the Manix, you're a little bit more forced either forward or backwards because of that sharp point right here that divides the forward and primary choil. But I like the Para 3 for the same reason. It doesn't have quite as long a handle, but I can still get my hand all the way around it back here, which is crazy. I never would have guessed that. And I can get my hand around it up here, but I still feel like it's roomy, you know? Now, a lot of people don't like that. You know, they would rather have more blade, and it's like, oh, it looks weird because you've got so much handle and so little blade. The PM2, I think, is the best example of that. That's an extreme example of way too much handle and not enough blade in terms of aesthetics. In terms of function, it's just fine. No problem with that. But that's where my bias come from, and that's why I had such a hard time, enjoying a smaller knife. I do not like 3-finger position knives. I just don't like it. I have gotten close a couple of times, but that has always over time killed it for me. Every time I pull it out of my pocket, I get to a point where I'm just like, I just want my whole hand wrapped around this thing. I just don't want to deal with a 3-finger position knife. So the Para 3 really does it for me. Really, really like that. Now, it's that in combination with a bunch of other things. Let's go over this knife since we're at the 9-minute mark and I haven't really said much. As you can see here, we have the classic sort of, I don't know, clip point, drop point, pelican-looking blade that Spyderco uses on their Delica and PM2 and some other things. Completely flat ground. Blade is the same stock thickness as the PM2, 145 thousandths. It's literally exactly the same, except it's shorter. So it tapers a little bit more dramatically. And the nice thing is you end up with slightly more of a reinforced tip than on the Para 2. just a little bit more material because it has to taper more dramatically to reach the blade length that it is. It's still a pretty delicate tip, and this was brought up to me a lot in the Spyderco discussion video. The biggest complaint with Spyderco knives, because I basically just bowed and worshipped to Spyderco for however long that video was, 20 minutes. The biggest complaint that I heard from people was, if you break one of their blades, they don't replace it. And they're so delicate. You can't, I don't like Spyderco knives because I can't, so, yeah, that's a concern. That is true. If you break the blade, as of right now, Spyderco does not have a blade replacement program, so that is an issue. For me, it's never been an issue because I'm not going to I can look at this knife and go, this isn't a knife that I'm going to stick the tip into places and try and pry with. That just, logic tells me that I shouldn't be doing that. Just like logic tells me that for the most part, you shouldn't be doing that with a folding knife at all. You should be using a fixed blade or rather a pry bar. Now, I realize in some situations you may not have that option. If that's the case, that's unfortunate. If you are forced into a situation where the only thing you have is a PM2 or a Para 3 and you have to pry something, well, then I guess there's really no way around that. That is just an unfortunate situation. Spyderco knives in general are ground in a way that emphasizes cutting performance and not necessarily the strength of the blade. But this all comes down to, as another commenter pointed out, are you using the right tool for the job? And again, you may not have an option. You may not always have an option. And then there's always this guy way back over here going, you should be using a box cutter for everything, and you should be using a hammer and a pry bar for everything. Yeah, I know, we get it. But not everybody wants to carry around a box cutter all day, every day. It's simply not the most convenient profile, and it's also not something that brings us joy. This channel wouldn't exist if people didn't have just kind of an attraction or a love or a joy for these things that's kind of beyond comprehension. As much as I try to comprehend and define it. But anyways, we got we got way off track there. What I'm saying is these blades do not emphasize strength, but they definitely do emphasize cutting performance. While the Para 3 is not quite as thin behind the edge as the PM2, it is definitely an excellent slicer. This thing has made short work of all the just regular tasks that I've been throwing at it. This is also a knife that I wouldn't have reservations against in terms of, if I had to do some heavy pressure cuts or some heavy cuts, kind of choked up on some wood, which is another reason I like the forward choil, is just for the control there. Or if I was breaking down cardboard boxes, I talk about this a lot. I love choking up and putting all the pressure of thick cardboard into a cut that's right here. I'm a big fan of that. I don't have any need to do any sort of, prying with the tip or anything like that, so I'm okay. What I do appreciate about a really thin tip is I get a lot of splinters. My hands are mostly dead skin, but I get splinters and things lodged into dead skin, and I don't realize it until later, and it gets infected. I'm like, ugh. So having a thin tip on a Spyderco is kind of nice to be able to dig splinters out, or do little teeny tiny delicate digging tasks. It is kind of nice to have that there. So I'm okay with that. I'm cognizant of the fact that it's a thin tip, and that's kind of the way that it is. You have, of course, the Spyderco hole, which is in exactly the right place for all of your, sort of fidgety style opening, whatever. I tend to open it two ways. I open my Spydercos like this, and when I'm feeling frisky, I open it up like that. They're both equally convenient. This knife is unbelievably convenient to simply open and whip shut and put away. I love that. That might be my favorite opening mechanism. I list it as flipper in one of those other videos, but my God, is that Spyderco hole easy to manipulate. Moving down to the scales here, we've got dark gray G10 scales that are peel ply textured. They're a little bit more rounded than the standard scales that you get on the PM2 or the Manix 2, and I appreciate that. Simple Torx head pivot. We've got positions for tip up, tip down, right or left-handed carry. It's technically not a fully ambidextrous knife considering the compression lock is on the left-hand side, but it's nice that you have the options anyway. The stop pin, which is freaking massive. Look at that thing. Stop pin is huge on this knife. Is pinned in place. It's not actually pins. They're just the tops of the metal, and you can lift the scale right off of them. But it used to be that they were screwed in. It's not the case on this knife. And then you've got one other screw holding in a standoff down here, and then you've got the lanyard barrel. The lanyard barrel is still a problem on this knife. If you want to take this knife apart and you want to add custom scales, you're going to have to mess with that and do the wiggle and scissor thing, and it sucks. And then putting it back together, you kind of have to use a hammer with something softer in between so you can kind of tap it back. It sucks. That's the way that it is. Liners are present and countersunk. They are steel liners. I really, really like that. That's nice. It's a instead of them being lipped out to the outside, they are countersunk, so you still get the strength benefits for the most part, and you have some weight reduction there, so that's pretty cool. We've got, of course, lanyard barrel is big enough for some paracord. You can see here that I have opted to change this pocket clip out, as I have with all of my Spyderco knives except for the Shaman, with the MXG Deep Carry pocket clip. In the case of the Manix, the Para 3, and the Spyderco PM2, the pocket clip simply solves a lot of problems. It solves an especially large problem with the Para 3, and this is one that has been beat into. I mean, this horse is long since dead, and we are still beating it. I'm going to beat it on this review. The lanyard, the lanyard barrel tube, whatever you want to call it, is just not in a good place in relationship with the stock position of the pocket clip. The standard pocket clip, the top of it is here, and then it comes down, making this knife stick way out of your pocket. I mean, you've literally got like this much of the knife sticking out of your pocket with the standard clip. So this MXG Deep Carry clip that's been cut in a way that allows it to kind of move past the hole, but you still have the full use of it, allows the knife to carry truly deep carry almost right up to the top of that, and it's just perfect. It's perfect. It solves that issue, and it's short enough that it's not a hot spot. It still has that spoon feeling, and it's easy to get your finger on and pull out. It's just perfect. I love that clip. It's so worth it. Titanium looks nice. I've got a couple of battle scars on it. I don't care. Having it carry this deep in my pocket saves the knife from getting messed up when I bump into stuff, and I don't mind if the pocket clip gets screwed up. No issues there whatsoever. That is really the biggest issue with the Spyderco Para 3. Let's talk about Maxamet real quick. Maxamet right now is, there still needs to be some more testing, but it looks like Maxamet is the current production king of edge retention. Surpassed only, definitively by, I think, S125V and Rex 121. Now, I'm sure there's some other stuff out there, but not as commonly known as S125V and Rex 121. We do not see S125V or Rex 121 because it's simply a nightmare to grind. Makers simply aren't willing to work with it. S110V kind of had the reign for a long time, and then Maxamet came along, and because of its, it lacks the corrosion resistance of S110V, but it has better edge stability and toughness, making its edge retentive qualities shine. This knife is optimally hardened, from what I understand, between 67 and 69 Rockwell. So this thing can cut, and it can cut for a long time, and it's tougher than S110V. The downside is it is not a stain-resistant steel. Now, I haven't had this knife very long, and I've put a little bit of oil on it, but you can see here, I'll wipe this off. You can see the patina is starting to form on this knife. I don't have a problem with that. I'm actually really excited to see the patina form. From what I understand, it doesn't really corrode. It doesn't get nasty and rusty unless you're in a really wet environment. It just patinas and has this nice sort of aged gunmetal kind of look to it. And I'm excited to see that. I'm just going to let Maxamet do its thing. Now, I've heard from a lot of places that, a lot of sources that, yeah, it's really hard. It's harder to sharpen than a lot of steels. It can be a nightmare. And I've heard from other sources like Super Steel Steve that it's not the worst thing in the world. You're going to have to put some time into it, but it will sharpen up. The consistency seems to be, don't start with a super low grit. Apparently you want to start like at 300 or 600 and just kind of, go slow and take your time because it can be chippy. That seems to be the general consensus. So I don't know. I'm hoping that, with the way that I'm going to use this knife, coordinated with the fact that it is so hyper edge retentive, I just won't have to sharpen it for a really long time. Now, if you're going to take this knife out and you're really going to work and you're really going to use it, I would say avoid prying. Obviously, avoid cutting into things like rocks or metal. But you should be able to work this steel pretty hard. And then the investment of time that you're going to have to put into sharpening it should be worth the payoff in usage. Now, I don't know because I don't have enough experience sharpening. I don't have enough experience using this steel in a working environment up against other steels. And I'm not a metallurgist, and I'm not a knife maker. I'm not a master of edge geometry. I'm just a guy with a camera and a tripod and some knives. So take that with a grain of salt. What I can say is that it's really, really cool that Spyderco is doing this. Apparently, they're doing this as a production run. Like, this is a production variant. It's not a sprint run. It's not an exclusive. The G10 and Maxamet Para 3 and PM2 are production versions. That's really cool. Please, please, please extend that to the Mannix and the Shaman. Oh my gosh, that would be so cool. Everybody out there wants a very specific version of their favorite knives, but I would think that they would at least extend that to the Mannix. The Shaman's kind of its own weird thing right now, and I think they're still figuring out how they can really get us to open up our wallets for the Shaman. And I'll be like, take my money. I need 8 different versions of the Shaman. But you know, like, I feel like they should extend that to the Shaman. I mean, imagine with me here. I've got some gray Allen Putnam scales on my Mannix too, but I've got the black blade. Imagine here the peel ply texturing G10 on the Mannix and the Maximus Steel. That'd be awesome. Definitely. That's a great, I think it's a great candidate for that steel. Anyways, the downside to this Maxamet variant is that it's very expensive. I think this is almost a $200 knife. That is a lot of money to pay. Now, this is, you know, the Para 3 is in Spyderco's Golden Colorado line. So this is a USA made Spyderco. It's also one of the knives that has both Eric and Sal's insignia on it, which basically those are the marks of, like, hey, 2 master knife designers created this knife, and it's a fantastic working tool, and I like that. I take pride in seeing the Golden Colorado mark and Eric and Sal Glesser's insignia on it. I like that. It's very obvious to me the quality of this knife and the time spent figuring out how to make this a convenient tool. But does that make it worth $200? It's really hard because it is still just kind of a blocky, basic Spyderco knife with an incredibly upgraded steel. You know, I've cracked jokes about this a lot, but this you know, in a lot of ways, this is it's an okay car frame with an incredible motor in it. You know, that's oftentimes the analogy that I use. Now, it would be a lot more understandable if this were in the $160 or $170 range. I can't imagine Maximus Steel is cheap, and it's definitely not. I mean, like, you can read about this. Zero Tolerance tried to do some, I think they did manage to do a few 888 models in Maxamet, and it had issues with warping. Somebody can correct me. They tried to heat treat it after they ground it, and then they had issues with warping, and it was super chippy, and it was just eating belts, and it was costing a lot of money. So it's probably not the cheapest steel in the world, and that's probably why you see the FRN variants of these Spyderco knives in Maxamet at like $140, $150. Are they maybe bumping it, you know, hyping up the steel a little bit, and maybe we're paying a premium for it? Maybe a little bit. I don't know. I'd have been a lot happier to see this at $160, $170, but on this channel, I'm always saying, like, oh, I like it, but it'd be nice if it was 20 or 30 bucks less. So would everything, you know? So I don't know. It's one of those things where if this speaks to you, then go for it. My experience with it is I technically, you know, my wife bought this for me, so this was a gift. So you might say that my opinions are biased, but I did decide long before. You can go back and see how many different variants of the Para 3 that I've reviewed. I did decide a long time ago that I had to have a Para 3 in my lineup. I just needed the perfect one to come along. Now, I thought it was going to be the crew wear variant, and funny enough, the reason I thought this, you know, because this gray G10 version of it was in front of my face all the time, I assumed that was the crew wear variant. I wasn't looking closely enough to realize that they had a Maxamet version with the same color G10. And my assumption was that certain steels are directly associated with certain colors, and they don't do different, you know, different colors with different steels. It's just a, you know, a consistent thing. So I didn't realize that this existed, but I was wanting to get a crew wear version, and they were always sold out. So when this version, and had I known that this version was available, I would have been like, definitely, that's the one that I want. You know, I'm very interested in Maximus Steel. So yeah, you know, for me, incredibly recommended. Now, I've been using this knife a lot. I have been using this knife a lot for general cutting tasks. I've been opening packages, I've been opening boxes, breaking down boxes, you know, opening envelopes. I've cut through tape. I have cleaned this blade off with oil twice. I have not had it very long, so I can tell you, even if you're going to oil it, it is not going to stop it from forming a patina. What I am impressed with is that there is no change whatsoever in this edge. Now, I haven't been really working this, but I have been using it on cardboard. This thing Maxamet does not seem to notice cardboard, at least as the way that I've used it. Now, not a lot. You know, I broke down about 4 days ago. I went outside and I broke down about 12 large cardboard boxes. The knife did not notice any of it. Obviously, I'm going to have to use it a lot more to really get a good idea of how Maxamet reacts over time to general use. But as far as like a regular EDC knife that you're going to use, if you really want, like, if you're like, I am never going to, you know, I'm just going to use this and just, you know, for regular stuff, I don't know that you may, I mean, it may be years before you have to resharpen it, you know? For other people who use it harder, I imagine you'll get a lot of use out of it before you have to sharpen it, and it's going to take some work to sharpen it. But from what I understand, it's kind of worth the payoff. You know, you have to pay attention in terms of, you know, I mean, it'll patina, but can it corrode, and can that cause problems down the road? Yeah, probably. You know, one of the things here is that it's probably going to require every now and then that I take it apart and clean it, because if it's going to come, you know, down to a point where it's really corrosion, you know, might cause a problem. My guess is it's going to be inside there, which is just, you know, when you have low chromium and high carbon, which, by the way, this is like under 4, is it like 4% chromium and like over 2% carbon? It's not stainless. You know, it's something to be concerned with. By the way, I think the way that the incredible edge retention is achieved is a combination of the hardness and obviously the composition of the steel, but vanadium. It's got an enormous amount of vanadium in there, and with vanadium being the way that I understand it, and one of the best or the best carbide former, that's why the edge is the way that it is. I read that the edge, you know, sometimes ends up toothy on Maxamet. Spyderco has managed to make this edge feel exactly the same as any of their other edges. The other nice thing about this Para 3 is that they have done their slightly reflective light grain structure stone wash to it. And I really appreciate that, especially considering that I can't really stop this patina from forming. So the patina is going to form, but the polish on this stone wash, the slight reflectivity, is going to show through that. And it's going to look really, really nice, in my opinion. It's going to develop this nice, classy, aged look. And I'm going to take care of it. I'm still going to oil it and protect it. But the patina is going to come, and I'm just going to let it be what it's going to be. Can I recommend this knife? Yes, definitely. I can recommend the Para 3 in any form. If there is a form of the Para 3 out there that suits your interests, it's the color you want, it's the steel you want, buy it. Some of these variants, like the Maxamet one, are going to be expensive. In fact, the Maxamet Para 3, I think, is probably the most expensive, you know, normal variant. That's not like a crazy, like, anniversary, I don't know. Yeah, it's a production variant. It's definitely the most expensive production variant. And I think it's the most expensive general variant, you know, amidst other exclusives and sprint runs that has ever come out. I still think it's worth it. I still think it's awesome. The one thing I am going to suggest, immediately replace the pocket clip. There's another one out there that people really like. I'm going to recommend the MXG deep carry clip. In this case, it actually made this knife end up costing, it was like $191 plus the $20 for the MXG deep carry clip. So you're looking at basically a $210, $211 knife. Yeah, it's expensive, but man, I just love this thing. It carries so well. I'm so impressed with it. I love it. Got to be cognizant about the tip. If you break it, that's it. Spyderco's not going to replace it for you. I would really like to hear that they change that in the future, but I don't know. What can you do? Really, really great knife. Very few things to not like. This is one of my favorite knives of all time. If you watched my recent top 15 knives of all time video, this is right there. I think it's like number 7 or number 8. This is an amazing knife. Highly recommended. So anyways, guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, or at least found it mildly entertaining, please leave a like. If you'd like to take a look at my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.